Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the simplest acts of courage. Mateo Cruz never imagined that rushing into a burning building would change everything, not just for the woman he saved, but for his entire family. When smoke billowed from the downtown high-rise, the widowed carpenter didn't hesitate. Inside, he found Silvia Laurent, one of the world's most powerful female tech billionaires, trapped and helpless. What happened next would challenge everything both believed about love, class, and second chances. But here's what makes this story remarkable. The fire that nearly claimed Silvia's life had already destroyed Mateo's carpentry workshop, his family's only source of income. When she learned this, her impulsive offer shocked them both. Will two people from completely different worlds find that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships create the strongest foundations? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cramped apartment as Mateo Cruz knelt beside his daughter's bed, gently shaking her shoulder. "Mija, time for school," he whispered, his calloused hands tender against her cheek. Sophia stirred, her dark eyes opening to meet his eyes that held the same quiet intelligence that had captivated him in her mother. "5 more minutes, Papa," she mumbled, pulling the thin blanket over her head. At 12, Sophia had inherited more than just her mother's eyes. She possessed Elena's sharp mind and gentle spirit, qualities that both comforted and worried Mateo. In this neighborhood, being too smart sometimes made you a target. "You know what your mama used to say," Mateo said, settling on the edge of the bed. "Every day is a gift, and gifts shouldn't be wasted sleeping." He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small wooden cross, no bigger than his thumb. The wood was worn smooth from years of handling, its surface polished by countless prayers and memories. He'd carved it himself during Elena's final weeks, working by her hospital bedside when sleep wouldn't come. Sophia sat up, fully awake now. She'd seen the cross countless times, but something in her father's expression told her this morning was different. "You're thinking about her again?" "I think about her every day," Mateo said, tucking the cross back into his pocket. "But today, I'm thinking about you, about your future, about how proud she'd be of that science project you've been working on." The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that opened into a living room, barely large enough for their second-hand couch and Diego's collection of soccer balls. But Mateo had made it a home. Hand-carved shelves lined the walls, displaying Sophia's academic awards and Diego's artwork. A wooden crucifix hung above the television, flanked by family photos that captured happier times. "Diego," Mateo called toward the second bedroom. "Let's go, champion. School doesn't wait for anyone." 8-year-old Diego bounded into the living room, his shirt on backwards and his hair sticking up in 3 directions. Where Sophia was thoughtful and measured, Diego was pure kinetic energy wrapped in a boy's body. "Papa, can we stop by the workshop after school? I want to see the bookshelf you're making for Mrs. Rodriguez." Mateo's smile faltered slightly. The workshop 3 blocks away in a converted warehouse was more than just his livelihood. It was his sanctuary, the place where he transformed raw wood into something beautiful and useful. The smell of sawdust and wood polish reminded him of his own father, who'd taught him that a man's hands were meant for creating, not destroying. "We'll see, Mijo," he said, tousling Diego's hair. "First, let's get you dressed properly, and Diego's shirt goes this way." As the children prepared for school, Mateo moved to the kitchen and began preparing their breakfast. 3 eggs sewn for each of them, scrambled with onions and peppers from the small garden he maintained on the fire escape. The coffee was strong and black, the way his father had taught him to drink it. These morning rituals anchored him, reminding him that despite the struggles, despite the loneliness that sometimes crept in during the quiet hours, he was building something worthwhile. "Papa," Sophia said, joining him at the small table with her backpack and a stack of library books. "Mrs. Henderson says there's a summer program at the university for advanced students. It's free, but..." But, Mateo prompted, setting her plate in front of her. But they want to interview parents, and I'd need transportation every day, and... She stopped, seeing the worry flicker across his face. It's okay, I don't need to go. Don't you dare, Mateo said firmly. Don't you dare limit yourself because of our circumstances. If you want this program, we'll find a way. Your education is not negotiable. Across the city, in a gleaming tower that pierced the morning sky like a steel and glass needle, Silvia Laurent stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun paint the ocean in shades of gold and amber. Her reflection stared back at Hera, woman of 34, who had conquered industries and accumulated wealth beyond most people's comprehension, yet who started each day with the same hollow ache in her chest. The penthouse office occupied the entire top floor of Laurent Technologies, a monument to innovation and ambition. Holographic displays showed real-time data from wildfire detection systems deployed across 3 continents. Artificial intelligence algorithms processed thousands of environmental variables every second, predicting fire behavior with unprecedented accuracy. This technology, her life's work, had saved countless lives and protected millions of acres of wilderness. But success had come at a cost. Miss Laurent? The voice belonged to Catherine, her assistant of 5 years. Your 9 o'clock is here. Silvia turned from the window, her expression shifting from contemplative to businesslike. Send them in. The next 2 hours blurred together in a succession of meetings, presentations, and strategic decisions. Venture capitalists seeking her investment, environmental scientists requesting funding for research, government officials wanting to discuss deployment of her systems in national parks. Each conversation was important, each decision potentially worth millions, yet Silvia found herself increasingly detached from the proceedings. It was during the 3rd meeting that her attention was drawn to a framed photograph on her desk, the only personal item in the sterile office. It showed her younger self, perhaps 25, standing beside Dr. James Chen, her former partner and mentor. They were both smiling, covered in soot and ash, celebrating the successful test of their first wildfire detection prototype in the mountains of Colorado. James had been more than a business partner. He'd been her anchor, the one person who could make her laugh when the pressure threatened to crush her. They'd planned to revolutionize environmental protection together, to build a company that would make a real difference in the world. But Marcus Webb had seen opportunity in their partnership, had whispered poison in James's ear about Silvia's ambitions, had orchestrated a corporate coup that left her with the company but without the man she'd loved. That was 6 years ago. James now worked for a competing firm, and Silvia had built her empire in the emotional wreckage of that betrayal. She'd promised herself she'd never again allow anyone close enough to hurt her. Miss Laurent? Catherine's voice pulled her back to the present. Are you all right? Fine, Silvia said, turning the photograph face down. What's next? You have a lunch meeting with the board at 12:30, then the presentation to the Japanese delegation at 3. And don't forget the charity gala tonight. You're the keynote speaker. Silvia nodded, but her mind was already elsewhere. Tonight's gala was for fire victims, families who'd lost everything to the wildfires her technology was designed to prevent. She'd written a speech about hope and resilience, about the importance of innovation in protecting vulnerable communities. But as she looked out at the city below, she wondered if her words would sound hollow, coming from someone who lived in an ivory tower, insulated from the real world by wealth and technology. Back in his workshop, Mateo ran his hands along the smooth surface of a dining table he'd been crafting for 3 weeks. The wood was reclaimed oak, salvaged from a 100-year-old barn in the countryside. Each board told a story weathered by seasons, marked by the passage of time, but still strong and beautiful. He'd learned to read wood the way others read books, understanding its grain and character, knowing exactly where to cut and where to preserve. Mr. Cruz? A voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see Mrs. Rodriguez, a widow in her 70s, who'd commissioned the bookshelf Diego had mentioned. Senora Rodriguez, Mateo said, wiping his hands on his apron. Perfect timing. I was just putting the finishing touches on your piece." He led her to the corner where the bookshelf stood, 6 feet tall and crafted from cherry wood. Each shelf was perfectly level, each joint seamless. But it was the details that made it special, the subtle curves he'd carved into the sides, the way the wood seemed to flow like water, the small rows he'd etched into the top corner as a tribute to her late husband's garden. "Oh, Mateo," she whispered, running her fingers along the smooth surface. "It's beautiful. Roberto would have loved it." "He's the one who taught me to appreciate good craftsmanship," Mateo said. "Remember how he'd spend hours in his workshop building those birdhouses?" Mrs. Rodriguez nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "He always said that working with your hands was a form of prayer, that you put a piece of your soul into everything you create." As Mateo helped her arrange for delivery, he reflected on the truth of those words. Each piece he created carried something of himself's, his hopes for his children's future, his memories of Elena, his determination to build something lasting in a world that often felt temporary and uncertain. The workshop itself was modest but well organized. Tools hung in precise order on pegboard walls. Lumber was stacked according to type and size. The air was filled with the scent of sawdust and wood stain, a perfume that Mateo found more appealing than any expensive cologne. This was his domain, the place where he transformed raw materials into objects of beauty and utility. But beneath the satisfaction of his craft lay a constant worry. The rent on the workshop was due next week, and he was already 2 months behind. The commission from Mrs. Rodriguez would help, but it wouldn't solve the larger problem. Orders had been slow lately, and the competition from mass-produced furniture was relentless. He'd been thinking about taking a second job, maybe construction work or landscaping. The pay would be better, but it would mean less time with Sofia and Diego, less time for the work that fed his soul. Elena had always said that compromise was part of life, but some compromises felt like betrayal. His phone buzzed with a text from Sofia. "At library working on project. Diego at soccer practice. Home by 6. Mateo smiled. Even at 12, Sofia was remarkably responsible, mature beyond her years in the way children of single parents often were. She'd taken on the role of Diego's protector and Mateo's helper without being asked, seeing it as her natural duty rather than a burden. He returned to his work, losing himself in the rhythm of sanding and shaping. This was meditation for him, a way of connecting with something larger than his immediate concerns. Each stroke of the plane, each careful measurement, each precise cut brought him closer to his vision of the finished piece. The afternoon sun slanted through the workshop windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Mateo paused to wipe sweat from his forehead, his hands temporarily stilled. In the quiet moment, he offered a silent prayer not for wealth or ease, but for the strength to provide for his children, to give them the opportunities they deserved, to honor Elena's memory by raising them with love and dignity. He had no way of knowing that across the city, in a gleaming tower that symbolized everything his world was not, a woman was staring out at the same sun, feeling the same ache of loneliness, the same longing for something real and lasting. He had no way of knowing that their paths would cross within hours, that a moment of crisis would bind their fates together in ways neither could imagine. For now, there was only the wood and the work, the quiet satisfaction of creation, and the promise of his children's voices when he returned home. It was enough. It had to be enough. But sometimes, life has other plans. The acrid smell hit Mateo first, even before he saw the smoke. He was walking back from the hardware store, a bag of wood screws in one hand and his phone in the other, when the scent of burning plastic and something else, something chemical, and wrong made him look up from Sofia's text about her science project. Black smoke poured from the windows of the Meridian Tower, 12 stories of glass and steel that housed everything from law firms to tech startups. Mateo dropped his bag and ran toward the building, his carpenter's instincts already cataloguing the danger signs. The smoke was too dark, too thick. This wasn't just paper burning. A crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, phones out, recording the spectacle. Fire trucks wailed in the distance, but Mateo could see they wouldn't arrive in time. On the 7th floor, a figure appeared at a window, pounding on the glass. "Someone's still up there," he shouted, but the crowd seemed frozen, mesmerized by the unfolding disaster. Mateo pushed through the gathered people and approached the building's entrance. The security guard was ushering people out, his face grim with concentration. "Sir, you can't go in there," the guard said, blocking Mateo's path. "There's someone on the 7th floor," Mateo said, pointing up at the window where the figure was still visible. "The elevators are down, and the stairwells are filling with smoke. The fire department won't get here in time." Mateo looked at the man's name tag. "Frank, I've been in construction for 15 years. I know these buildings. There's always a service stairwell." Frank hesitated, torn between protocol and the reality of the situation. "Southeast corner," he said finally. "But the smoke." Mateo was already moving. He'd learned long ago that when people needed help, you didn't wait for permission or perfect conditions. You acted. The service stairwell was narrow and poorly lit, designed for maintenance access rather than emergency evacuation. Mateo pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth as he climbed, the smoke growing thicker with each flight. By the time he reached the 7th floor, his eyes were watering and his lungs burned with each breath. The hallway was a maze of smoke and confusion. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the haze, and the sound of fire alarms was deafening. Mateo moved methodically, checking each office, calling out as he went. "Hello, anyone here? Fire department's coming." Most of the offices were empty, abandoned in the rush to evacuate. But as he approached the corner office, he heard something, a voice, weak but persistent, calling for help. The door was locked, but the frame was standard commercial grade. Mateo stepped back and drove his shoulder into it, feeling the lock give way on the second impact. Inside, he found her. Silvia Laurent sat behind a massive desk, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled. Her laptop was clutched against her chest like a shield, its screen cracked but still glowing. She looked up at him with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse from smoke. "Someone who's getting you out of here," Mateo replied, moving quickly to her side. "Can you walk?" "I think so. I was trapped when the elevator went down. The stairs are compromised. We're taking the service route." He helped her to her feet, noting the way she favored her left ankle. "What's in the laptop?" "Everything," she said simply. 5 years of research, the fire detection algorithms. If this is lost, then we don't lose it." Mateo took the damaged laptop and tucked it under his arm. "But right now, we focus on getting out alive." They made their way back to the stairwell, Silvia leaning on Mateo's arm as they descended. The smoke was worse now, and he could hear the ominous sound of glass breaking somewhere above them. The fire was spreading faster than he'd anticipated. "Why did you come back for me?" Silvia asked as they reached the 5th floor. "Because you needed help," Mateo said, as if the answer were obvious. "You don't even know who I am." "Doesn't matter. You're a human being in danger. That's enough." They emerged from the building just as the first fire truck arrived, its crew already deploying hoses and equipment. Paramedics rushed to check on Silvia, but she waved them off, more concerned with the laptop than her own injuries. Miss Laurent, a young man in an expensive suit, pushed through the crowd, his face pale with worry. "Thank God you're safe. When we heard about the fire—" "I'm fine, Marcus," Silvia said, though Mateo noticed the slight tremor in her hands. "Thanks to—" She turned to Mateo, realizing she didn't know his name. "Mateo Cruz," he said, extending a hand still grimy from the climb. "Silvia Laurent." She shook his hand, her grip firm despite everything. "I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything," Mateo said. "I'm just glad you're okay." Marcus Webb, because that's who the young man was, though Mateo didn't know it, yet stepped forward with practiced smoothness. "Miss Laurent, we should get you to a hospital. And perhaps it would be best if we didn't speak to the media about—" "About what?" Silvia's voice carried an edge Mateo hadn't heard before. "About the fact that Mr. Cruz risked his life to save mine while everyone else stood around recording videos." Before Marcus could respond, a reporter pushed forward, microphone extended. Miss Laurent, can you tell us what happened? Was this related to the threats your company has been receiving? Threats? Mateo asked, but Silvia was already turning away. No comment, she said firmly. Then, to Mateo, could we speak privately for a moment? They moved away from the crowd, near where the fire trucks had cordoned off the area. In the afternoon light, away from the smoke and chaos, Mateo got his first clear look at the woman he'd rescued. She was beautiful, certainly, but it was her eyes that struck him, intelligent and determined, but also deeply tired, as if she carried burdens that wealth and success couldn't lighten. I need to ask you something, Silvia said, clutching the damaged laptop. Do you know what I do? Who I am? Should I? Mateo asked honestly. For the first time since he'd found her, Silvia smiled, a real smile, not the practiced expression she wore for cameras and board meetings. Laurent Technologies. We develop wildfire detection and prevention systems, environmental protection technology. That's important work, Mateo said, especially with the way fires have been getting worse. Yes, it is, and this, she held up the laptop, contains 5 years of research data, algorithms that could revolutionize how we predict and prevent wildfires. If this had been lost... She was interrupted by the sound of her phone ringing. She glanced at the screen, and her expression darkened. Excuse me, I need to take this. Silvia, the voice on the other end was male, concerned. I just heard about the fire. Are you hurt? I'm fine, James. A bit shaken, but fine. Thank God. Listen, I'm flying in tomorrow. We need to talk about the Morrison account. And with this fire... James, not now. Sylvia's voice was strained. I need to... Of course, I'm sorry. Just please be careful. And Silvia, I'm glad you're safe. She ended the call and stood silent for a moment, staring at the building where smoke still poured from the upper floors. Someone important? Mateo asked gently. My former business partner, she said. It's complicated. Before Mateo could respond, his own phone rang. Sophia's ringtone theme from her favorite science documentary. Papa? Her voice was tight with worry. I saw the news. There's a fire downtown. Are you okay? I'm fine, Mija. Everything's okay. Good, because there's something else. About your workshop. Mateo's blood went cold. What about the workshop? It's on the news. The fire spread to the building next door. Papa, I'm so sorry. The phone slipped from Mateo's hand. Silvia caught it before it hit the ground, her reflexes sharp despite her ordeal. The workshop, he said numbly. My workshop is gone. Silvia handed him back his phone, understanding immediately. She'd seen that look before, the expression of someone watching their life's work disappear. I'm so sorry, she said softly. Mateo stood in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what he'd lost. Not just the building and the tools, though those were irreplaceable on his budget, but the works in progress, the commissioned pieces, the carefully accumulated materials, everything that represented his livelihood and his passion. Papa? Sophia's voice came through the phone, distant but clear. Papa, are you there? He raised the phone back to his ear. I'm here, Mija. We'll figure it out, she said with the wisdom of a child who'd already learned that life could be unpredictable and cruel. We always do. Yes, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. We will. When he ended the call, Silvia was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Your workshop was your livelihood. My everything, he said simply. 15 years of building a business, tools that belonged to my father. Work that was supposed to feed my family for the next 6 months. He looked at the burning building, then at her. But you're alive. That's what matters. Silvia was quiet for a long moment, studying this man who had risked his life for a stranger and was now minimizing his own devastating loss. Around them, the controlled chaos of emergency response continued, firefighters battling the blaze, paramedics treating minor injuries, police managing the crowd. Where will you go? She asked finally. Home, to my children. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. Mr. Cruz, Mateo. She hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. "I have a proposition for you." The voice-activated gates of Silvia's Malibu estate responded to her car with silent efficiency, sliding open to reveal a winding driveway that seemed to flow like water through manicured gardens. Mateo sat in the passenger seat of Silvia's Tesla, still processing the surreal turn his day had taken. In the back seat, Sofia and Diego pressed their faces to the windows, their earlier skepticism giving way to wonder. "Welcome to your temporary home," Silvia said, though her voice carried an uncertainty that hadn't been there during their initial conversation. The mansion emerged from the landscape like something from a dream, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the late afternoon sun. It was modern without being cold, grand without being ostentatious. The ocean stretched beyond it, endless and blue, a view that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. "Papa," Diego whispered, "are we really going to live here?" "Temporarily," Mateo emphasized, catching Silvia's glance in the rearview mirror, "while we figure out our next steps." The house's smart system recognized Silvia's approach before she'd even parked. Lights came on automatically, adjusting their warmth to the time of day. The front door unlocked itself with a soft chime. Even the garage door opened without any visible signal, revealing a space that could have housed 6 cars but currently held only Silvia's Moon, Dozas, and a vintage Porsche that looked like it rarely left its spot. "The system learns your preferences," Silvia explained as they gathered their meager belongings from the trunk. "Temperature, lighting, musicit all adapts to your routine." Sofia, who had been quiet since leaving their apartment, finally spoke. "How does it know what you want if you've never told it?" "Artificial intelligence," Silvia said, impressed by the depth of the question. "It observes patterns in your behavior and makes predictions based on data analysis. But what if you want something different? What if you want to be surprised?" Silvia paused, car keys still in her hand. It was a question she'd never considered. "I suppose I've never wanted to be surprised." The interior of the house was as impressive as its exterior, soaring ceilings, an open floor plan that flowed seamlessly from room to room, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. But what struck Mateo most was how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, but empty quiet. The kind of silence that suggested a space more lived in by machines than by people. "Catherine sent over some basics," Silvia said, indicating shopping bags lined up on the kitchen island. "Clothes for the children, toiletries, that sort of thing. She's very efficient." "You have someone shop for children's clothes without meeting the children?" Mateo asked gently. "Ah, yes." Silvia looked suddenly unsure of herself. "Was that wrong? I can have her return everything." "No, it's generous. It's just," Mateo searched for the right words. "Sofia's 12, but she's particular about her clothes. And Diego, well, Diego could probably live in soccer jerseys if we let him." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Diego bounded into the kitchen, his eyes wide with excitement. "Miss Silvia, there's a pool, and it has lights, and I think I saw a tennis court." "Tennis and swimming," Sofia said more pragmatically. "Do you have lessons for those things? Because we don't know how." "You don't need lessons to enjoy a pool," Silvia said, though her tone suggested she'd never used a pool without proper instruction. "And the tennis court, well, I don't really use it myself." "What do you use?" Mateo asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Silvia gestured vaguely at the house around them. "The office, the gym, the kitchen, occasionally, though usually Catherine arranges for meals to be delivered." "You don't cook?" Diego asked, with the blunt honesty of an 8-year-old. "Not really, no." "Papa makes the best huevos rancheros," Diego announced, "and his pancakes are shaped like animals. Can he cook here?" Of course," Silvia said, though she looked at the pristine kitchen, as if seeing it for the first time. "Though, I should warn you, I'm not sure what's actually in the pantry." Mateo moved to the massive refrigerator, its stainless steel surface unmarked by fingerprints or magnets or any of the small traces of daily life. Inside, he found an impressive array of high-end ingredients, most of them unopened. Truffle oil, imported cheeses, organic vegetables that looked like they'd been arranged by an artist. "This is beautiful food," he said diplomatically, "but do you have eggs, milk, bread?" Silvia opened several cabinets, revealing an assortment of gourmet items that looked more like display pieces than ingredients. "There's imported pasta, and some kind of artisanal flour. Oh, and quinoa, lots of quinoa." Sophia giggled, the first genuinely happy sound she'd made since they'd arrived. "Papa, remember when you tried to make quinoa that one time? It turned out like birdseed," Mateo admitted with a smile. "We ended up ordering pizza." "I could order food," Silvia offered quickly. "There's an excellent restaurant that delivers, French cuisine, very sophisticated." "Or," Mateo said gently, "we could go to the grocery store tomorrow and stock up on regular food, family food." The word family seemed to hang in the air, and Mateo immediately regretted using it. This wasn't a family situation, it was a temporary arrangement, born out of crisis and impulse. But Silvia didn't seem offended, just thoughtful. "I'll have Catherine arrange for groceries," she said finally. "Actually," Mateo said, "would it be okay if we went ourselves? The kids like to pick out their own cereal, and I need to see what kind of cooking equipment you have before I plan meals." Silvia looked surprised by the request, as if the idea of personally shopping for groceries was foreign to her. "Of course, whatever you prefer." A soft chime sounded throughout the house, and Silvia's expression shifted to something more businesslike. "That's my evening briefing. I need to take a call with our Tokyo office." She paused, looking suddenly awkward. "I'll show you to your rooms first." She led them through the house, pointing out amenities with the detached tone of a tour guide. The media room with its cinema-quality screen. The library with its carefully curated collection of business books and literary classics. The gym with equipment that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Your wing is here," she said, opening a door that led to a separate section of the house. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a small living area. It has its own entrance, so you'll have privacy. The guest wing was larger than their entire apartment had been, decorated in soothing neutrals with touches of coastal blue. Each bedroom had its own bathroom and walk-in closet. The living area included a kitchenette and a comfortable seating area with views of the ocean. "This is incredible," Sophia said, setting her backpack on one of the beds. "But Miss Laurent, why are you doing this? You don't even know us." It was a fair question, and Mateo found himself curious about the answer. Silvia had made her offer at the scene of the fire, but in the chaos of the moment, there hadn't been time to discuss motivations or expectations. "Your father saved my life," Silvia said simply, "and in doing so, he lost everything. It seemed like the least I could do." "But you could have just given us money," Sophia pressed, with the logic of adolescence. "Why invite us to live here?" Silvia was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer than before. "I suppose I wanted to do something that mattered, something real." Diego, who had been exploring his new room, called out from the bathroom, "Miss Silvia, the shower has like 20 buttons. What do they all do?" "It's a smart shower," Silvia explained, moving to help him. "You can control temperature, pressure, steam, even aromatherapy settings." "What's aromatherapy?" "Scents that are supposed to help you relax or energize." "Can it smell like cookies?" Don't think so." "That's okay," Diego said philosophically. "Regular water is fine too." As Silvia demonstrated the shower controls, Mateo found himself watching her with growing curiosity. She was clearly intelligent and accomplished, but there was something almost childlike about her amazement at Diego's simple questions, as if she was seeing her own life through fresh eyes and finding it both impressive and somehow lacking. "Miss Laurent," Sophia said from the doorway, "can I ask you about your work, the fire detection systems?" Silvia's face lit up in a way it hadn't since they'd arrived. "Of course. What would you like to know?" "How do they work? I mean, how do you predict where a fire will start before it actually starts?" For the next 20 minutes, Silvia explained the complex algorithms and sensor networks that made her technology possible, while Sophia listened with rapt attention. Mateo noticed how Silvia's posture changed as she talked about her work. She became more animated, more confident, more herself. "So the system is constantly learning," Sophia said, "like it gets smarter every time there's a fire." "Exactly. Each incident provides more data points, which improve the predictive accuracy." "That's amazing. Could the same principles work for other types of disasters, like earthquakes or floods?" "Theoretically, yes. Though each type of disaster has different variables and warning signs." Diego, less interested in complex algorithms, had wandered back to the living area and discovered that the television responded to voice commands. "Cool, TV, show me cartoons." The screen immediately displayed a menu of children's programming, causing Diego to laugh with delight. "How did it know I was a kid?" he asked. "Voice analysis," Silvia explained. "It can determine approximate age and gender from vocal patterns." "But what if I wanted to watch grown-up shows?" "Well, there are parental controls." "Or what if Papa wanted to watch cartoons? Adults can like cartoons too." Another pause from Silvia, another question she'd apparently never considered. "I suppose they can. I never really thought about it." "Papa watches this one show about a sponge who lives underwater," Diego confided. "He says it's because we watch it, but I think he actually likes it." "I do like it," Mateo admitted with a grin. "It's funny." As the evening settled in around them, Mateo began to understand that they weren't just staying in Silvia's house. They were entering her world. A world of automation and efficiency, where every need was anticipated and met by invisible systems. It was impressive, certainly, but it was also profoundly lonely. His children, with their endless questions and unfiltered observations, were already beginning to change the dynamic of the space. Diego's laughter echoed through rooms that had probably been silent for months. Sophia's curiosity was drawing out a side of Silvia that she seemed to have forgotten existed. And Mateo found himself wondering if Silvia's offer had been motivated by more than just gratitude. Maybe, like all of them, she was looking for something she hadn't even known she was missing. 3 days into their stay, Mateo discovered the greenhouse by accident. He'd been exploring the grounds early in the morning, coffee in hand, trying to understand the scope of the property while the children slept. The glass structure sat behind a grove of eucalyptus trees, partially hidden from the main house by deliberate landscaping. From the outside, it looked abandoned. The glass panels were clouded with salt spray and neglect, and wild vines had begun to claim the metal framework. But as Mateo approached, he could see the bones of something magnificenter, Victorian-style conservatory that must have once been the heart of an impressive garden. The door, surprisingly, was unlocked. Inside, he found a space that took his breath away, despite its obvious neglect. The greenhouse was enormous, perhaps 30 feet by 60, with soaring glass walls that would have filled the space with natural light when clean. Even now, with dirty windows filtering the morning sun, the potential was unmistakable. But it was the remnants of what had been that truly captured his imagination. Weathered wooden benches lined the walls, their surfaces marked by years of plant pots and garden tools. A sophisticated irrigation system, now dry and dormant, suggested this had once been a serious growing operation. In one corner, an old potting bench held the traces of soil and the forgotten tools of someone who had loved this space. "You found it." Mateo turned to see Silvia standing in the doorway, still in her silk pajamas and robe, a cup of coffee in her hands. Her hair was down, falling in waves around her shoulders, and without her usual business attire, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "I'm sorry," he said. "I was just exploring. I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding. This is Wasmi grandmother's greenhouse." She stepped inside, her bare feet silent on the dusty floor. "She died 4 years ago. I kept meaning to restore it, but life got in the way," Mateo finished gently. "Something like that." Silvia moved to one of the benches, running her fingers along its weathered surface. "She used to grow everything in here. Orchids, herbs, tomato. She said plants didn't care about your bank account or your business plan. They just needed attention and care. She sounds like a wise woman." She was the only family I had after my parents died. When I bought this house, I bought it partly because it reminded me of her place in Sonoma. She had a greenhouse there too, smaller than this, but Silvia's voice trailed off. Mateo studied the space with new understanding. What did she grow here? Everything. She had a theory that people needed to stay connected to the earth, especially people in technology. She said we spent so much time in virtual worlds that we forgot what real growth looked like. Smart woman. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Through the dirty glass, Mateo could see Diego chasing seagulls across the lawn, his laughter carrying on the morning breeze. "It could be beautiful again," he said quietly. "I've thought about hiring a restoration company, someone who specializes in historical greenhouses. Or," Mateo said carefully, "someone could restore it with love instead of just expertise." Silvia looked at him sharply. "Are you offering?" "I'm suggesting this is your grandmother's space. It deserves more than just professional competence. You're a carpenter, not a gardener." "My wife was the gardener in our family," Mateo said, his voice soft with memory. "But I helped her build raised beds, repair trellises, construct cold frames. I learned that good gardening starts with good bone-solid structures that can support growth." Silvia was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. "What would it take? To restore it, I mean." "Time, materials, permission to make mistakes and learn as we go." He paused. "And maybe a partner who knows about plants." "I don't know anything about plants." "Yet," Mateo said with a smile. "But your grandmother's knowledge is still here, in the way she designed this space. We could learn together." Before Silvia could respond, Diego burst through the greenhouse door, his face flushed with excitement. "Papa, there you are!" Sophia found a tide pool, and there are anemones and hermit crabs ando. "Hi, Miss Silvia. What is this place?" "It's a greenhouse," Silvia said, crouching down to Diego's level. "My grandmother used to grow plants here." "Like vegetables?" "Vegetables, flowers, herbs, all kinds of things." Diego's eyes lit up. "Could we grow tomatoes? I love tomatoes. And maybe corn. Papa, remember when we tried to grow corn on the fire escape?" "It got too tall for the space," Mateo explained to Silvia. "We had to move it to Mrs. Rodriguez's backyard." "We could grow corn here," Silvia said thoughtfully, "if we wanted to." "Really?" Diego bounced on his toes. "Could we start today?" "It takes time, Mijo," Mateo said. "First we'd need to fix the greenhouse, then prepare the soil, then plant seeds and wait for them to grow." "How long?" "Months," Silvia said. "Maybe a full growing season." Diego's face fell slightly. "But we might not be here that long." An awkward silence settled over the group. They'd all been avoiding the question of how long this arrangement would last. But Diego's innocent observation brought it into sharp focus. "We'll see," Mateo said finally. "For now, let's focus on what we can do today." "Like exploring tide pools," Sophia said, appearing in the doorway. "Diego, you left me talking to hermit crabs by myself." "Sophia," Silvia said, "have you ever seen a working greenhouse?" "Only in pictures. Why?" "Your father thinks we should restore this one." Sophia looked around the space with the analytical eye she brought to everything. "It has good bones," she said, unconsciously echoing her father's assessment. "The structure looks sound. What happened to it?" "Neglect," Silvia said simply. "Sometimes life moves so fast that important things get left behind." "But they can be reclaimed," Sophia said with the confidence of youth. "Right?" "Usually," Silvia agreed, "with enough effort and care." As they made their way back toward the house, Diego peppered Silvia with questions about greenhouses and growing seasons, while Sophia walked quietly beside her father. "Papa," she said in Spanish, "are we really going to stay here long enough to grow a garden?" "I don't know, mija," he replied in the same language. "This situation is complicated." "But you like her?" It wasn't a question, and Mateo found himself at a loss for words. He did like Silvia, more than was probably wise given their circumstances. But liking someone and building a life with them were vastly different things. "She's a good person," he said carefully. "And she's lonely." Sophia observed with the intuition that sometimes surprised him. The way she looks at us like she's trying to remember something she lost. Before Mateo could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of car doors slamming in the driveway. A moment later, Marcus Webb appeared around the corner of the house, his expression a mixture of frustration and concern. "Silvia," he called out, his voice carrying an edge of irritation. "We need to talk." Silvia's posture changed immediately, becoming more formal, more guarded. "Marcus, I wasn't expecting you. Your assistant said you were taking personal time, given the fire and the quarterly reports. Can this wait?" Silvia glanced at the children, then at Mateo. "I'm with my guests." Marcus's gaze swept over Mateo and the children with barely concealed disdain. "This is exactly what we need to discuss. Silvia, the board is concerned about your judgment lately." "My judgment?" "Moving strangers into your home after a traumatic event. Making impulsive decisions without consulting the company's legal team. The media is already speculating about your mental state." Mateo felt his jaw clench. But before he could speak, Sophia stepped forward. "Excuse me, Mr. Webb. Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb, are you saying that helping people is bad judgment?" Marcus looked taken aback by the directness of the question. "I'm saying that business decisions should be made with clear heads and proper advice." "But this isn't a business decision," Diego chimed in. "This is about being nice to people." "Children," Marcus said with patronizing smile, "sometimes grown-up situations are more complicated than they appear." "Sometimes," Sophia replied with steel in her voice, "they're exactly as simple as they appear." Silvia stepped forward, her expression cold. "Marcus, perhaps we should continue this conversation privately." As they moved away from the group, Mateo could hear the beginning of what was clearly going to be a heated discussion. He felt a familiar anger rising, the protective instinct that flared whenever someone threatened his family, extended now to include Silvia. "Papa," Diego said quietly, "I don't like that man." "Why not, Mijo?" "He talks to us like we're stupid, and he makes Miss Silvia sad." From the mouths of babes, Mateo thought. Diego's assessment was remarkably accurate for an 8-year-old. "People sometimes say things they don't mean when they're worried," Mateo said diplomatically. "But he wasn't worried," Sophia observed. "He was angry. There's a difference." 20 minutes later, Silvia returned alone, her composure intact but her eyes troubled. Marcus's car was gone from the driveway. "Everything okay?" Mateo asked. "Fine," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Just business complications. The kind of complications that come from having strangers in your house." Silvia looked at him sharply. "You're not strangers. Not anymore. But we are complications." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes, but not the kind Marcus thinks." That evening, as they sat down to their first family dinner together, Mateo had insisted on cooking and had somehow managed to create a feast. From Silvia's eclectic pantry, conversation turned to plans and possibilities. "If we were to restore the greenhouse," Silvia said, serving herself some of Mateo's improvised pasta primavera, "what would we need?" "Tools, materials, time," Mateo said, "and patience. A lot of patience." "I'm not good with patience," Silvia admitted. "But you're good with planning," Sophia said. "You could make a schedule, break it down into phases." "Phase 1, cleaning and assessment," Mateo suggested. "Phase 2, structural repairs. Phase 3, systems restoration. Phase 4, planting," Diego added eagerly. "That's a long-term commitment," Silvia said carefully. "The best things usually are," Mateo replied. As they finished dinner, Silvia found herself watching this family that had unexpectedly entered her life. 3 days ago, her biggest concern had been quarterly projections and board meetings. Now she was contemplating soil composition and growing seasons, listening to Diego's elaborate plans for a vegetable empire, watching Sophia sketch greenhouse layouts on her napkin. The change was unsettling and exhilarating in equal measure. For the first time in years, she was thinking beyond the next quarter, beyond the next acquisition, beyond the careful strategies that had built her empire. She was thinking about tomatoes and teaching moments, about laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent too long. But Marcus's words lingered in her mind. The board was watching. The media was speculating. Every decision she made now would be scrutinized through the lens of this unprecedented arrangement. "Miss Silvia," Diego's voice broke through her thoughts. "Are you okay? You look sad." "I'm not sad," she said, managing a smile. "I'm just thinking." "About what?" "About whether I know how to do this. Any of this." "Nobody knows how to do everything," Sophia said pragmatically. "That's why people help each other." "And why people practice," Diego added. "Like soccer. I wasn't good at soccer when I started, but now I'm pretty good." "Pretty good?" Mateo laughed. "You scored 3 goals last game." "Okay, I'm really good," Diego admitted with a grin. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Mateo and Silvia found themselves back in the greenhouse, this time with a flashlight and a bottle of wine Silvia had discovered in her rarely used cellar. "Thank you," she said as they sat on one of the old benches. "For dinner, for today, for this." "You're the one providing the home," Mateo pointed out. "I'm providing the space, you're providing the home. There's a difference." They sat in comfortable silence, the beam of the flashlight creating a small circle of light in the vast, dark space. Outside, the ocean whispered against the cliffs, a constant reminder of the boundary between their temporary sanctuary and the wider world. "Marcus is right about one thing," Silvia said finally. "This is complicated. More complicated than I anticipated when I made the offer." "How so?" "I didn't think about the media attention, the questions about my judgment, the impact on my company." She paused. "I didn't think about what it would mean to have people in my space. Real people, with real needs and opinions and messiness." "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," she said quickly, then more slowly. "No, but I'm realizing that I may have bitten off more than I can chew. Or maybe you're just realizing that there's more to life than what you can control." Silvia turned to look at him in the dim light. "Is that your professional opinion, Dr. Cruz?" "That's my father's opinion. Sometimes the best things come from the situations we can't control or predict." "Like what?" "Like Sophia's curiosity about science. She gets that from her mother, but it's being shaped by experiences I never could have planned. Like Diego's resilience, he's learned to adapt to change because life taught him early that things don't always go according to plan." "And you? What have you learned from the uncontrollable situations?" Mateo was quiet for a moment, considering. "That love comes in forms you don't expect. That strength can come from accepting help. That sometimes the best foundation is built on uncertain ground." Silvia felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight control she'd maintained for so long. "I've spent 6 years building walls," she said softly. After the betrayal, I decided that independence was the only safety, control was the only security. And now I have 3 people living in my house who represent everything I thought I didn't want. Chaos, unpredictability, vulnerability." She smiled. "And I've never felt more alive." The word hung between them, loaded with possibility and fear in equal measure. Mateo reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers rough against her soft palm. "Alive can be scary," he said. "Terrifying," she agreed, "but also worth it?" "I think so. I hope so." As they made their way back to the house, flashlight beam dancing ahead of them, neither of them noticed the long-lens camera trained on them from the road beyond the property gates. Neither of them saw the flash of the photographer, who had been watching the house for 2 days, waiting for exactly this kind of moment. By morning, their private conversation would be front-page news. Their growing connection transformed into tabloid speculation about the billionaire and her rescue romance. The complications Marcus had warned about were about to become very real indeed. The science fair project started innocently enough. Sophia had been struggling with her assignment for Week's Design, an experiment that demonstrates environmental science principles, when Silvia offered to help during one of their evening conversations. "What if we created a small-scale wildfire prediction model?" Silvia suggested as they sat in the renovated greenhouse, now cleared of debris and equipped with Mateo's first improvements. New glass panels and a working irrigation system. Sophia's eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that reminded Silvia of her younger self. Could we really do that? I mean, wouldn't it be too complicated for a sixth-grade project? Not if we simplify the variables. Focus on the basics: temperature, humidity, wind speed, vegetation, moisture. Silvia pulled out her tablet and began sketching a diagram. We could build a small environmental chamber, create different scenarios, and test how accurately we can predict fire behavior. That's incredible, Sophia breathed. But I don't know anything about programming or sensors or... That's what mentors are for, Silvia said with a smile that transformed her entire face. Besides, the best way to learn is by doing. And so began an unlikely partnership that would change both of their lives in ways neither anticipated. Every evening after Sophia finished her regular homework, she and Silvia would retreat to what had become their shared workspace, a corner of the greenhouse, where Silvia had installed a proper work table and brought in some of her less sensitive equipment from the office. Diego would join them sometimes, more interested in the mechanical aspects of their project than the scientific theory, while Mateo worked on the greenhouse restoration around them. "Okay," Silvia said on their fourth night of collaboration. "Explain to me what happens when relative humidity drops below 30%. The vegetation becomes more susceptible to ignition." Sophia recited, then paused. "But why? I mean, I understand that dry things burn easier, but what's actually happening at the molecular level?" The question caught Silvia off guard. Most adults accepted simplified explanations, but Sophia's 12-year-old mind demanded to understand the underlying mechanisms. "Water molecules in plant tissue create a protective barrier," Silvia explained, pulling up a molecular diagram on her tablet. "When humidity drops, the plant loses moisture through transpiration. Less water means less energy required to reach ignition temperature. So the water isn't just making things wet, it's actually absorbing heat." "Exactly. Water has a high specific heat capacity, which means it takes a lot of energy to change its temperature," Sophia finished. "We learned that in physical science." Silvia stared at the girl with something approaching awe. "You have an exceptional mind, Sophia." "Papa says I get it from my mom. She was going to be an engineer before..." Sophia's voice trailed off. "Before what?" "Before she had me. She put her career on hold to raise us, and then she got sick before she could go back to school." The weight of unspoken sacrifice hung between them. Silvia understood, perhaps better than most, the cost of dreams deferred. "Your mother sounds like a remarkable woman," Silvia said softly. "She was. Papa says she would have loved this project. She always said that science was just another way of understanding God's creation." It was a perspective Silvia had never considered, the intersection of faith and empirical observation. In her world, science and spirituality occupied separate spheres. But seeing it through Sophia's eyes, she began to understand how they might complement rather than contradict each other. "Tell me about your father," Silvia said as they waited for their latest sensor calibration to complete. "What do you want to know? How did he become a carpenter? Was it always his plan?" Sophia considered the question carefully. "He says he fell into it by accident. He was studying business in college, but he needed money, so he took a summer job with a construction crew. He discovered he loved working with his hands, creating things that would last." "And your mother was okay with him changing direction?" "More than okay. She said she fell in love with his hands first, the way they could be so gentle with her, but so strong with his work." Sophia smiled at the memory. She used to say that watching him work was like watching prayer in action. Through the greenhouse windows, they could see Mateo installing new shelving along the far wall, his movements economical and precise. Even from a distance, his expertise was evident in the way he handled his tools, the care he took with each measurement. "He's teaching Diego, you know," Sophia continued. "Basic carpentry skills. Diego pretends he's only interested in the power tools, but I can see him watching everything Papa does, learning." "Is that what you want to do?" Follow in your parents' footsteps? I want to build things too, Sophia said thoughtfully. But maybe different kinds of things, solutions to problems, systems that help people. Like environmental monitoring systems. Like that, yeah. But also maybe medical devices, or water purification systems, or, Sophia gestured excitedly. There are so many problems that need solving. Silvia found herself remembering her own childhood dreams before corporate politics and betrayal had hardened her focus to pure business success. She'd started Laurent Technologies to save forests, to protect communities from wildfire devastation. Somewhere along the way, the mission had become secondary to market share and quarterly profits. Sophia, she said carefully, what would you say if I told you there are summer programs at Stanford for students like you? Programs that let you work with real scientists on real projects. I'd say that sounds amazing and completely impossible. Why impossible? Sophia looked at her with the practical wisdom of a child who'd learned early that dreams had price tags. Because programs like that cost money. And because Papa would never let me go that far from home, even if we could afford it. What if the money wasn't a problem? It's always a problem, Sophia said simply. That's just life. The matter-of-fact resignation in her voice broke something open in Silvia's chest. Here was a brilliant child, full of curiosity and potential, already learning to limit her dreams to fit her circumstances. What if I told you I could make it not a problem? Sophia looked up sharply. You mean like pay for it? I mean like invest in it, in you. But why would you do that? It was a fair question, and one Silvia wasn't sure she could answer completely. Part of it was practical. Sophia represented the kind of scientific mind that could genuinely contribute to important research. Part of it was personal seeing. Sophia's potential reminded Silvia of her own younger self, hungry for knowledge and opportunity. But there was something else, something she was only beginning to acknowledge. In the past week, watching Sophia's mind work, seeing her excitement over discovery, Silvia had remembered what it felt like to be passionate about learning rather than just achieving. Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted, Silvia said finally. Because your mother was right. Science is a way of understanding creation, and understanding leads to the ability to protect and improve the world. And because you care about us, Sophia said with the directness that always caught Silvia off guard. Yes, Silvia admitted, because I care about you, all of you. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, fine-tuning the sensors that would form the heart of Sophia's project. The science fair was still 3 weeks away, but their prototype was already more sophisticated than anything typically seen at the middle school level. Miss Silvia, Sophia said as they packed up for the evening, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why don't you have kids of your own? The question hit like a physical blow, not because it was intrusive, but because it was something Silvia had been asking herself with increasing frequency since the Cruz family had entered her life. I've been focused on other things, she said carefully, building the company, developing technology. But you're good with us. With kids, I mean. You explain things without talking down to us. You listen to our ideas like they matter. They do matter. I know, that's what I mean. So why? Because I was afraid, Silvia said, the honesty surprising even herself. Afraid I wouldn't be good at it. Afraid I'd mess up something that important. But you're not messing up with us. This is different. You're not my responsibility. If I make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes with kids, Sophia said with the wisdom of someone who'd observed many adult-child interactions. Papa makes mistakes with us all the time. The difference is whether you care enough to try to do better. Before Silvia could respond, Diego burst through the greenhouse door, his face flushed with excitement. Sophia, Miss Silvia, come quick. Papa's made something amazing. They followed him to the main workshop area, where Mateo had been laboring over a surprise project for the past several days. Covered by a paint-spattered tarp, it had been a source of great curiosity for both children. Okay, Mateo said, grinning at their expectant faces. Remember how we talked about needing proper work surfaces for your science project? He pulled away the tarp to reveal a beautiful custom workbench, perfectly sized for Sophia's height, with built-in storage for equipment and a special compartment designed specifically for her laptop and tablet. The wood was honey-colored oak, sanded to silk smoothness, with hand-carved details that elevated it from mere furniture to art. "Papa," Sophia whispered, running her hands along the surface. "It's perfect." "Every scientist needs a proper laboratory," Mateo said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would have wanted you to have the best tools possible." Silvia watched the family moment with a mixture of joy and longing that surprised her with its intensity. The love between father and daughter was palpable, built on years of shared struggles and small triumphs. The workbench wasn't just furniture, it was a statement of faith in Sophia's future, a tangible commitment to her dreams. "How did you know exactly what she needed?" Silvia asked. "I've been watching," Mateo said simply, "seeing how she works, what she reaches for, where she puts things. Good design starts with observation." "That's what good science starts with too," Sophia said, still marveling at her new workspace. As they admired Mateo's craftsmanship, Silvia realized that she was witnessing something she'd never experienced, the way love manifested in careful attention to another person's needs and dreams. Marcus had been wrong about the complications this family brought to her life. The real complication was that they were teaching her things she'd never learned about what home could be, what family could look like, what it meant to invest in someone else's future, not because it made business sense, but because love demanded it. The science fair project had become something much more significant than a school assignment. It was becoming a bridge between worlds, a collaboration that was changing everyone involved in ways they were only beginning to understand. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who required Silvia's personal signature. She almost dismissed it as another contract or legal documenther. Life was full of papers requiring signatures, but something about the weight of the envelope, the quality of the paper, made her pause. Inside, she found a formal document with the Laurent Technologies letterhead and a cover letter from the law firm of Hendricks, Morris, Associates. As she read, her coffee grew cold in her hands, and the familiar weight of betrayal settled in her stomach. Notice of shareholder motion for vote of no confidence. The language was legal and circuitous, but the message was clear. Marcus Webb, leveraging his 20% stake in the company and the support of 3 other board members, was calling for a formal review of her leadership, citing recent erratic behavior and questionable personal decisions that may compromise the company's fiduciary responsibilities to shareholders. The supporting documentation was thorough and damning in its implications. Photographs of her and Mateo in the greenhouse, taken with a telephoto lens, financial records showing the unexplained personal expenditures of housing and feeding the Cruz family. Most devastating of all, a psychological evaluation report suggesting that trauma from the fire had impaired her judgment. "That son of a bitch," she whispered, then immediately felt guilty for using such language in a house with children. She read through the document twice, her business mind automatically cataloguing the legal strategies at play. Marcus had been planning this for months, possibly years. The fire had simply provided him with the opportunity he'd been waiting for, a way to frame her compassion as instability, her humanity as weakness. Her phone rang. Catherine's name appeared on the screen. "I assume you've seen the motion." Catherine's voice was carefully neutral. "Just now. How long have you known?" "The courier service called an hour ago to confirm delivery. Silvia, this is serious. Marcus has been building support for weeks. The board meeting is scheduled for Friday." 4 days. Silvia closed her eyes, calculating rapidly. "What's our position?" "Legally, strong. You still control 45% of voting shares, and your track record speaks for itself. Practically, more complicated. The media attention around your house gestures, some investors nervous. My house guests have nothing to do with company performance. I know that, and you know that, but perception matters in business, and Marcus has been very careful about how he's framing this." Silvia walked to her office window. looking out at the grounds where Diego was teaching Mateo to skateboard down, amusing reversal that had resulted in several spectacular falls and much laughter. The normalcy of the scene felt surreal against the corporate warfare being waged in conference rooms and legal offices. "Schedule a call with our legal team," she said finally, "and get me everything you can on Marcus's recent activities. Financial records, travel schedules, meeting logs, everything. Already in progress. Silvia, are you going to tell them?" "Tell who what?" "The family. Are you going to tell them what's happening?" Silvia was quiet for a moment. The question went to the heart of everything that had changed in her life over the past 2 weeks. The old Silvia would have handled this crisis alone, compartmentalizing her personal and professional lives completely. But living with the Cruz family had eroded those careful boundaries. "I don't know," she admitted. "What would you do?" "I'd tell them," Catherine said without hesitation. "They're not children, well, 2 of them are, but Mateo's an adult, and Sophia's wise beyond her years. They have a right to know that their presence here might have consequences." After ending the call, Silvia found herself drawn back to the legal documents. The psychological evaluation was particularly Galinga report based on observed behavioral changes and anonymous sources close to Ms. Prasenbasnai data. Laurent, that painted her recent actions as evidence of emotional instability rather than what they actually were, the first genuinely human choices she'd made in years. "Miss Silvia," Sophia's voice came from the doorway. "Are you okay? You look upset." Silvia quickly closed the folder, but not before Sophia's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of the legal letterhead. "Just business complications," Silvia said, forcing a smile. "The bad kind or the challenging kind?" Sophia asked, settling into the chair across from Silvia's desk with the casual familiarity that had developed between them. "What's the difference?" "Well, challenging complications make you think harder and come up with better solutions. Bad complications just make people mean to each other for no good reason." The simple wisdom of the observation hit Silvia like a physical blow. "This might be the bad kind. Want to talk about it?" Before Silvia could answer, Mateo appeared in the doorway, his hair tousled from his skateboarding lesson and a grass stain on his shirt. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. "Diego wanted to know if he could invite some friends from school to see the greenhouse this weekend." "Of course," Silvia said automatically, then paused as the implications hit her. "Actually, maybe that's not the best timing." "Why not?" Sophia asked, her analytical mind immediately sensing something wrong. Silvia looked between father and daughter, these people who had become so important to her so quickly, and made a decision that would have been impossible just weeks earlier. "Because there are some people who think my judgment has been compromised by having you here, who think that helping your family makes me unfit to run my company." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Mateo's expression shifted from confusion to something harder, more protective. "The man who was here before," he said. "Marcus. This is his doing." "Among others. But yes, Marcus is leading the charge." "Then we should leave," Mateo said immediately. "We never meant to cause problems for you." "No," Sophia said firmly, surprising both adults with her vehemence. "That's exactly what they want. They want us to leave so they can say that Miss Silvia's episode is over and she's back to normal." "Sophia," Mateo began. "No, Papa, this is wrong. Miss Silvia saved our family when our workshop burned down. She's helping me with my science project. She's making Diego laugh every day and teaching him about technology, and now some mean people want to punish her for being kind." Silvia felt something break open in her chest, a feeling she'd spent years avoiding because it made her vulnerable. These people, this family, were willing to fight for her. Not for her money, or her success, or her business connections, but for her. "It's not that simple, mija," Mateo said gently. "Sometimes doing the right thing has consequences." "Then we deal with the consequences," Sophia replied with steel in her voice. "Together." "Sophia's right," Silvia said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Running away won't solve anything. Marcus will just find another way to challenge my leadership." "So what do we do?" Mateo asked. "We fight back," But intelligently, strategically, Silvia pulled out her tablet and began making notes. Marcus thinks he's using my personal life against me. What if we turn that around? How? By showing that my personal growth has made me a better leader, not a worse one. By demonstrating that the same qualities that made me reach out to your family, quick thinking, compassion, the ability to see potential where others see problems, are exactly the qualities Laurent Technologies needs. Sophia leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest. Like a case study? Show how the scientific method applies to leadership decisions? Exactly. Marcus wants to paint this as emotional instability. We'll show it as evidence-based decision-making. But first, Mateo said quietly, we need to know exactly what we're up against. Silvia nodded and opened the legal folder, spreading the documents across her desk. As they read through Marcus's accusations together, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the strength that comes from not facing a crisis alone. He's been planning this for months, she said, pointing to the timeline of Marcus's actions. The fire just gave him an opportunity to accelerate his timeline. But why? Sophia asked. Why does he want to take over your company? Power, money, the chance to redirect our technology toward more profitable applications. Silvia's voice carried years of accumulated frustration. Marcus has never understood that some things are more important than quarterly profits. Like what? Like actually preventing wildfires instead of just profiting from the cleanup. Like protecting communities instead of just protecting shareholders. Mateo studied the psychological evaluation with the careful attention he brought to architectural plans. This report is not based on any actual examination, is it? No, it's based on behavioral observations from anonymous sources. So it's gossip dressed up in medical language. Essentially, yes. Then we discredit it, Sophia said matter-of-factly. We get a real psychological evaluation. We document your actual behavior patterns. We use science to fight pseudoscience. Silvia stared at the 12-year-old, who was calmly dismantling a corporate coup attempt with the same methodical approach she brought to her science fair project. That, she said slowly, is brilliant. It's basic scientific method, Sophia replied with a shrug. When someone makes a claim without evidence, you counter with actual evidence. As they spent the afternoon developing their strategy, Silvia realized that Marcus had made a fundamental error in judgment. He'd assumed that her connection to the Cruz family was a weakness to be exploited. In reality, it was a strength. He couldn't understand the power that comes from having people in your life who value you for who you are rather than what you can provide. The battle for Laurent Technologies was about to begin, but for the first time in years, Silvia wasn't fighting alone, and that, she was beginning to understand, made all the difference. The fire investigation report arrived by secure courier on Wednesday morning, 48 hours before the board meeting that would determine Silvia's future with Laurent Technologies. She signed for it with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear of what it might contain, but from the growing certainty that her suspicions were about to be confirmed. Catherine sat across from her desk as Silvia broke the official seal and opened the folder. The Los Angeles Fire Department's logo was embossed on the cover page, lending gravity to the document that would change everything. Meridian Tower Fire, Final Investigation Report, Silvia read aloud. Cause, deliberate incendiary action, evidence of accelerant use on floors 6 through 8. Pattern consistent with coordinated ignition points designed to ensure rapid spread and impede evacuation. She looked up at Catherine, whose face had gone pale. It was arson. Keep reading, Catherine said quietly. Silvia turned the page, scanning the technical details about burn patterns and chemical analysis, until she reached the section that made her blood run cold. Investigation of surveillance footage and access records indicates unauthorized entry to the building at 2:47 a.m. on the morning of the incident. Subject gained access using a security card registered to Weber Consulting Services, a firm contracted for building maintenance and security assessments. Weber Consulting Services. The name was familiar, but Silvia couldn't immediately place it. She continued reading as Catherine pulled out her laptop and began typing rapidly. Subsequent investigation reveals Weber Consulting Services is a subsidiary of Webb Industries, LLC, registered in Delaware, with Marcus Webb listed as primary shareholder. The folder slipped from Silvia's hands, papers scattering across her desk. Catherine looked up from her laptop, her expression grim. "I've been digging into Marcus's finances since you asked," she said. "Webb Industries has some interesting connections, including a consulting contract with Meridian Towers Property Management Company, signed just 3 months ago." "Marcus had access to the building," Silvia said slowly, pieces of a horrifying puzzle clicking into place. "He could have planted the accelerants." "There's more. Look at this." Catherine turned her laptop around, showing a complex web of financial transactions. 3 weeks before the fire, Webb Industries purchased a significant insurance policy on the Meridian Tower building. But more importantly, they also acquired a substantial short position on Laurent Technologies stock. "He was betting against my company. He was betting against your company, and he had inside information about an event that would cause our stock to drop." Catherine's voice was tight with controlled anger. "The fire wasn't just about discrediting you personally. It was about destabilizing the company financially." Silvia felt sick. The pieces of Marcus's plan were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Burn down the building where Laurent Technologies leased office space. Ensure she was inside during the fire, counting on her dedication to staying late for the quarterly review preparation. If she died in the fire, he'd inherit control of the company through various succession clauses. If she survived but was traumatized, he could challenge her competence and seize control. "But he didn't count on Mateo," she said quietly. "No, and he definitely didn't count on you rescuing the laptop with 5 years of research data. That was supposed to be destroyed in the fire." The investigation report contained additional details that painted an even darker picture. The fire had been set on multiple floors to ensure maximum damage and confusion. The building's sprinkler system had been sabotaged, not obviously enough to be detected in advance, but sufficiently to delay effective suppression. Marcus had planned for casualties. "There's something else," Catherine said, her voice hesitant. "About Mateo's workshop." Silvia looked up sharply. "What about it?" "The address. It's in the same block as the Meridian Tower. When I cross-referenced the insurance claims." "No." Silvia's voice was barely a whisper. "The fire spread to Mateo's building because the arsonist used accelerants designed to jump between structures. It wasn't collateral damage, it was intentional." The full scope of Marcus's cruelty hit Silvia like a physical blow. He hadn't just targeted her company and her life, he'd deliberately destroyed the livelihood of an innocent family. Mateo's workshop, his tools, his commissioned pieces, the business he'd built over 15 years, all of it sacrificed to Marcus's ambition. "He destroyed their lives to get to me," she said, her voice shaking with rage, "and then used your response to their situation as evidence of your instability." Catherine closed her laptop with a sharp click. "It's diabolical. It's attempted murder." Silvia stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, she could see Mateo and Diego working in the greenhouse, their laughter carrying on the afternoon breeze. The normalcy of the scene felt obscene against the backdrop of Marcus's calculated malice. "What do we do?" Catherine asked. "We call the police. We turn this evidence over to the district attorney. Silvia." Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. "The board meeting is in 36 hours. Even if the DA moves quickly, which they won't, Marcus could have control of the company before criminal charges are filed. Then we present this evidence to the board. Will they believe it? Marcus has been cultivating relationships with those board members for months. He'll claim it's a desperate attempt to deflect from your unstable behavior." Silvia stopped pacing, her mind racing through possibilities and strategies. Catherine was right. The truth alone wouldn't be enough. They needed irrefutable proof, presented in a way that even Marcus's allies couldn't dismiss or rationalize. "The security footage," she said suddenly, If Weber Consulting had access to the building, there should be records of Marcus or his people entering the building that night. Already requested. It should arrive this afternoon. And the insurance policies, the stock trades? Documented and verified. The pattern is clear to anyone willing to look at it objectively. But that's the problem, isn't it? Objectivity. Silvia sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted. Marcus has spent months poisoning the well, making the board question my judgment. Even with this evidence, they might see it as confirmation that I'm paranoid and unstable. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Sophia peered around the edge, her expression cautious. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but there are some men here with cameras. They're asking questions about our family and taking pictures of the house." Through the window, Silvia could see the news vans lined up along her private road. Reporters with microphones and cameramen with long lenses, all focused on her home, their home. "Marcus," she said grimly, "he's escalating." Catherine joined them at the window. "This is coordinated. He's trying to create a media circus before the board meeting." "Papa sent Diego inside," Sophia continued, "but the reporters kept asking him questions about you, about our family. One of them asked if it was true that you were having a nervous breakdown." The invasion of her privacy was infuriating, but what made Silvia truly angry was the targeting of the children. Marcus had crossed a line that she hadn't even known existed in her moral universe. "Where's your father now?" she asked Sophia. "Still outside with the reporters. He's trying to be polite, but I can tell he's getting mad." "He shouldn't have to deal with this," Silvia said, moving toward the door. "None of you should." "Miss Silvia," Sophia said quietly, "there's something else. One of the reporters said they had pictures of us working in the greenhouse. But we've been careful to stay inside the property lines. How would they have pictures unless someone with access to the property gave them to the media?" Silvia finished. The betrayal cut deep, though she shouldn't have been surprised. Marcus had always been thorough in his manipulations. Catherine was already on her phone, presumably with their security company. "I'm having the gates locked and calling for additional security," she said. "But Silvia, this is exactly what Marcus wants, a circus that makes you look unstable and embattled." "Then we don't give him what he wants," Silvia said with sudden determination. "Sophia, go find your father and Diego. Bring them inside. We're going to handle this properly." As Sophia hurried away, Silvia turned to Catherine. "Set up a press conference for this evening, here, on the property." "Are you sure that's wise?" "I'm sure that hiding is exactly what Marcus expects. He wants me to look guilty and defensive. Instead, we're going to be transparent and professional." "And the investigation report?" "We present the facts. All of them. Let the public decide whether helping a family in crisis makes someone unfit for leadership, or whether deliberately destroying lives for corporate gain is the real scandal here." An hour later, Silvia sat in her living room with the Cruz family, explaining the full scope of what they were facing. The fire investigation report lay open on the coffee table between them, its implications stark and unavoidable. "He tried to kill you," Diego said with the blunt honesty of childhood, his young face serious with understanding. "Yes," Silvia said simply, "and he destroyed your father's workshop to cover his tracks." Mateo was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "All those years of work, all those tools that belonged to my father, the commissioned pieces for my customers, he destroyed it all for money." "For power," Silvia corrected. "Money was just the means to the end." "What happens now?" Sophia asked. "I mean, you have proof, right? The police will arrest him?" "Eventually, yes, but first we have to make sure he doesn't take control of the company. If he gains access to our wildfire detection systems, he could sabotage them or sell the technology to the highest bidder, regardless of how it might be used." "You mean he could make the fires worse instead of preventing them?" Sophia said, her scientific mind immediately grasping the implications. "Exactly. Which is why we can't wait for the justice system to work. We have to act now." "What do you need us to do?" Mateo asked. The question caught Silvia off guard. She'd been thinking in terms of protecting them from the fallout, not involving them in the fight. You don't need to do anything, she said. This isn't your battle. Yes, it is, Sophia said firmly. He hurt our family too. He destroyed Papa's life's work. And if he takes over your company, he'll hurt lots of other families. Besides, Diego added with 8-year-old logic, you helped us when we needed it. Now we help you. It could be dangerous, Silvia warned. Marcus has already shown he's willing to use violence to get what he wants. Then we're careful, Mateo said, but we don't abandon family when they're in trouble. The word family hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that none of them had quite acknowledged before. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, lines had been crossed and bonds had been formed that went deeper than gratitude or temporary convenience. The press conference, Silvia said finally. I want you there with me, all of you, not as victims but as partners, as people who understand what's really at stake here. What should we say? Sophia asked. The truth, that kindness isn't weakness, that helping people isn't a character flaw, that the real measure of leadership isn't how much profit you can generate, but how much good you can do. As the afternoon wore on, they prepared for what would essentially be a public trial. Catherine coordinated with security and media relations, while Silvia reviewed her presentation materials. Sophia helped organize the evidence files with the same methodical approach she brought to her science projects, while Diego and Mateo worked on logistics, where people would stand, how the equipment would be arranged, what backup plans they needed if things went wrong. Miss Silvia, Sophia said during a quiet moment, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you scared? Silvia considered the question carefully. A month ago, the answer would have been a simple yes. The prospect of public scrutiny, of having her private life dissected by strangers, of potentially losing the company she'd built, all of that would have terrified her. I'm concerned, she said finally, but not scared, not the way I would have been before. Why not? Because I'm not facing this alone, because I have people who believe in me, not just for what I can do for them, but for who I am. She paused. Because I've learned that some things are more important than being safe. Like what? Like being true to yourself, like protecting the people you love, like standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. As evening approached and the media gathered for the press conference, Silvia felt a calm she hadn't experienced in years. Whatever happened in the next 24 hours, she was facing it with integrity and with the support of people who had become more important to her than corporate success or financial security. Marcus Webb had made one critical miscalculation in his elaborate scheme. He'd assumed that Silvia's compassion was a weakness to be exploited. Instead, it had become the source of a strength he couldn't understand or counter. The fire that was supposed to destroy her had instead forged connections that would prove unbreakable. The battle for Laurent Technologies was about to reach its climax, but the war for Silvia's soul had already been won. The rebuilt workshop tools gleamed under the greenhouse's new LED lighting system as Mateo made his final preparations for the most important presentation of his life. It was 5 a.m. on the morning of the board meeting, and he'd been awake since 3, his hands working with the careful precision that had defined his craft for 2 decades. But this wasn't carpentry in any traditional sense. This was reconstruction of a different kind, the methodical assembly of evidence that would either save Silvia's company or condemn them all to Marcus Webb's version of corporate justice. Couldn't sleep either? Silvia's voice came from the greenhouse entrance, where she stood silhouetted against the pre-dawn darkness. Old habit, Mateo said, not looking up from his work. When I have something important to build, I start early. Gives me time to think through each step. Silvia approached the workbench, where he'd laid out the physical evidence like components of a complex project. Fire investigation reports, insurance documents, security footage stills, financial records, all organized with the same attention to detail he brought to dovetail joints and finish work. This isn't really about building, is it? She observed. Everything is about building, Mateo replied, finally meeting her eyes. The question is whether you're building something that will last or something that looks good until the first strong wind. And which are we building? Truth, he said simply. which is the strongest foundation there is. They worked in comfortable silence as the sun began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Sophia joined them at 6:30, already dressed and carrying her tablet with the presentation slides they'd prepared together. Diego appeared a few minutes later, drawn by the sound of voices and the smell of the coffee. Silvia had learned to make the way the family liked it, strong and black, with a touch of cinnamon. "Today's the day," Sophia said, settling at her custom workbench with the serious demeanor she brought to important projects. "How do you feel?" Silvia asked. "Ready," Sophia replied without hesitation. "We've checked our facts 3 times. We've anticipated their counter-arguments. We've prepared for every scenario we can think of." "That's very scientific of you." "It's very practical," Sophia corrected. "Papa taught us that good preparation prevents most problems." "And when problems happen anyway?" Diego asked, climbing onto a stool beside his sister. "Then you adapt," Mateo said. "You use the tools you have and the skills you've learned, and you solve the problem one step at a time." By 8 a.m., they'd reviewed their strategy for the final time. Catherine arrived with last-minute intelligence from her network of corporate contacts, and the picture it painted was sobering. "Marcus has been busy," she reported, spreading fresh documents across the workbench. 3 more board members have agreed to support the no-confidence motion. That puts him just 1 vote short of the majority he needs. "Who's the swing vote?" Silvia asked. "Eleanor Martinez. She's been with the company since the beginning, but she's also practical above all else. If she thinks the controversy is hurting business, she'll vote with Marcus," Silvia finished. "Possibly, but Eleanor also values loyalty and integrity. If we can show her that Marcus is the real threat to the company's values." "Then we have a chance," Sophia interjected, "but only if our presentation is perfect." The next 2 hours were spent in final rehearsals. They practiced their timing, refined their arguments, anticipated hostile questions. Mateo watched his daughter transform from a 12-year-old girl into a confident advocate, her natural intelligence enhanced by weeks of working with Silvia on complex technical concepts. "Remember," Silvia said as they prepared to leave for the Laurent Technologies headquarters, "this isn't just about saving my position as CEO. It's about protecting the company's mission, preventing wildfires, protecting communities, using technology to make the world safer rather than just more profitable. And it's about making sure bad people don't win," Diego added with the moral clarity of childhood. "Exactly," Silvia agreed. "It's about making sure bad people don't win." The Laurent Technologies headquarters building was a monument to innovation and environmental responsibility. Solar panels covered the roof. The walls were lined with living plants that helped purify the air. And the conference rooms were designed to maximize natural light while minimizing energy consumption. It was the physical manifestation of Silvia's vision for what a technology company could be. As they entered the executive conference room where the board meeting would take place, Mateo felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about corporate politics, it was about whether kindness and integrity could survive in a world that often rewarded their opposites. The board members were already assembled, their faces reflecting various degrees of concern, curiosity, and skepticism. Eleanor Martinez sat at the far end of the table, her expression carefully neutral. Marcus Webb occupied the seat directly across from where Silvia would sit, his posture confident and his smile predatory. "Before we begin," Marcus said as they took their seats, "I want to address the obvious. Miss Laurent has chosen to bring children to what should be a serious business meeting. I think this exemplifies exactly the kind of poor judgment that concerns the board." "Actually," Sophia said, her voice clear and confident, "we're here as witnesses, people who have direct experience with the events that led to this meeting. Children are hardly reliable witnesses." "I'm not speaking as a child," Sophia interrupted. "I'm speaking as someone who understands scientific method and evidence-based reasoning, which, given the claims in your motion, seems relevant." Eleanor Martinez leaned forward, her interest clearly piqued. "Go on." Mr. Webb's motion claims that Miss Laurent's behavior following the fire demonstrates emotional instability. But he's making that claim without any actual evidencino, psychological evaluation, no performance metrics, no objective measurements of any kind. There's plenty of evidence, Marcus began. Anecdotal evidence, Sophia said firmly. Gossip and speculation dressed up as analysis. In science, we call that bad methodology. Mateo watched his daughter with pride and amazement. She was dismantling Marcus's arguments with the same logical precision she brought to her homework, treating the corporate coup attempt like a flawed hypothesis that needed to be tested against actual data. What we have instead, Sophia continued, is clear evidence of what really happened and why. Silvia stood and moved to the presentation screen. 3 days ago, we received the final fire investigation report. I think you'll find it illuminating. For the next hour, they methodically presented their case. The fire investigation showing deliberate arson, the financial records revealing Marcus's insurance fraud and stock manipulation, the security footage proving his access to the building, the timeline demonstrating his careful orchestration of events. But it was Mateo's testimony about his destroyed workshop that seemed to hit the board members hardest. His quiet dignity as he described 15 years of work reduced to ash, his lack of bitterness despite devastating loss, his focus on rebuilding rather than revengeite, painted a picture of the kind of people Silvia had chosen to help, and by extension, the kind of person she was. Mr. Cruz, Eleanor Martinez said when he finished, what do you want from this company? What's your end game here? I want my children to grow up in a world where helping people in crisis is seen as strength, not weakness, Mateo replied. I want them to know that when someone shows you kindness in your darkest moment, you stand with them when they face their own darkness. And what do you want for yourself? Mateo glanced at Silvia, then back at Eleanor. I want to rebuild, not just my workshop, but something bigger. A partnership between people who believe that business success and social responsibility aren't mutually exclusive. You're talking about a permanent arrangement, another board member observed. I'm talking about family, Mateo said simply, which is always permanent, even when the circumstances change. The room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. This wasn't just about housing a displaced family or proving Silvia's mental competence. This was about a fundamental transformation in how she approached both business and life. Marcus leaned forward, sensing an opportunity. This is exactly what I mean. Ms. Laurent has allowed personal feelings to cloud her business judgment. She's confusing a company with a charity. Actually, Sophia said, she's demonstrating exactly the kind of innovative thinking that built this company in the first place. She moved to the presentation screen and pulled up a new slide-yone they hadn't rehearsed, that she'd apparently prepared on her own. Laurent Technologies was founded on the principle that technology should serve human needs, not the other way around. The wildfire detection systems work because they're designed by people who care about protecting communities, not just generating profits. She clicked to the next slide, showing Laurent Technologies' performance metrics over the past 5 years. Under Miss Laurent's leadership, the company has consistently outperformed industry averages in both financial returns and social impact. The question isn't whether her recent actions show poor judgment, it's whether the board wants to continue that success or abandon it for short-term profits. This is a boardroom, not a classroom, Marcus said with barely concealed irritation. Then let's talk like business people, Sophia replied coolly. Mr. Webb, what's your plan for Laurent Technologies if you gain control? I don't need to justify my vision to a 12-year-old. You need to justify it to the shareholders, Eleanor Martinez interjected, and I'd like to hear your answer. As Marcus outlined his plans, cost-cutting measures, staff reductions, pivot toward more profitable military applications, Mateo watched the board members' faces. He could see the growing realization that this wasn't about saving the company from Silvia's poor judgment, but about fundamentally changing what the company stood for. There's one more thing, Silvia said as Marcus finished his presentation, something that goes beyond business plans and financial projections. She pulled out her tablet and displayed a new image on the screen, a photograph of herself, Mateo, Sofia, and Diego working together in the greenhouse, their faces bright with laughter and shared purpose. 6 months ago, I was the most isolated person in this room. I had professional success but no personal life. I had accomplished individual goals but had never been part of something larger than myself. She paused, looking directly at each board member. The fire didn't damage my judgment, it clarified it. It showed me that a company is only as strong as the relationships it builds, the communities it serves, the lives it impacts. Marcus wants you to believe that caring about people makes me unfit to lead. I'm asking you to consider that it's exactly what makes leadership worthwhile. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Eleanor Martinez spoke. I think, she said slowly, it's time for a vote. Eleanor Martinez's declaration fell into the conference room like a stone dropped into still water, the ripples of consequence spreading outward to touch every person at the polished mahogany table. The wildfire detection prototype that Sofia had built for her science fair project sat on the table before Thema, a small device that had become symbolic of everything this vote represented. Before we proceed, Eleanor continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had navigated corporate waters for 3 decades, I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what we're voting on. She stood and moved to the presentation screen, her silver hair catching the morning light that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the Pacific Ocean stretched to the horizon, a reminder of the natural world that Laurent Technologies existed to protect. Mr. Webb's motion calls for a vote of no confidence in Silvia Laurent's leadership, based on claims of emotional instability and poor judgment following the Meridian Tower fire. Eleanor's voice was measured, clinical. The evidence presented today paints a very different picture. Marcus shifted in his seat, his confident demeanor beginning to show cracks. Eleanor, I understand that the arson allegations are serious, but they don't change the fundamental question of Silvia's fitness to lead. Actually, they change everything, Eleanor interrupted, because they reveal that this entire motion is based on a manufactured crisis. You orchestrated the very situation you're now using to justify removing her from leadership. That's speculation. That's evidence. Sofia spoke up from her seat beside Silvia, her young voice cutting through Marcus's bluster with scientific precision. The security footage shows you entering the building. The financial records show your insurance policies and stock trades. The fire investigation confirms arson using accelerants your company had access to. Even if all of that were true, another board member interjected, it doesn't address the question of whether Ms. Laurent's personal involvement with, he gestured vaguely at the Cruz family. These people represents a conflict of interest. What kind of conflict? Mateo asked quietly. His voice carried no anger, just genuine curiosity about the logic being applied. Financial, emotional, the possibility that personal feelings could compromise business decisions. You mean the way personal greed compromised Mr. Webb's business decisions when he chose to burn down a building for insurance money? Diego asked, with the devastating honesty of an 8-year-old. The room fell silent. Even Marcus seemed momentarily at a loss for words in the face of such straightforward moral clarity. Out of the mouths of babes, Eleanor murmured. Then louder, the boy raises a fair point. We're debating whether compassion compromises judgment while ignoring how greed has demonstrably compromised judgment. This is ridiculous, Marcus said, his composure finally cracking. We're letting children run a board meeting. We're letting evidence guide our decision-making, Silvia said, standing to face him directly, which is what boards are supposed to do. She moved to the presentation screen and pulled up the wildfire detection prototype's data interface. This device was built by a 12-year-old girl, using principles she learned from our research. It can predict fire behavior with 87% accuracy, better than our first-generation commercial systems. So? Marcus demanded. So it represents exactly the kind of innovation that comes from collaboration, from bringing together different perspectives, from caring about the people our technology serves. Silvia's voice grew stronger with each word. Sophia didn't build this because she wanted to impress anyone or make money. She built it because she wanted to understand how wildfires work, so she could help prevent them. That's very touching, but nothing, Eleanor said firmly. Marcus, your vision for this company is about profit margins and market share. Silvia's vision is about using technology to solve real problems for real people. I know which one I'd rather invest in. The vote, when it came, was swift and decisive. 7 board members voted to reject the no-confidence motion. 3 voted in favor. Marcus's carefully orchestrated coup had failed, undone by the very compassion he'd tried to weaponize against Silvia. "This isn't over," Marcus said as he gathered his papers, his face flushed with humiliation and rage. "Yes, it is," Eleanor replied calmly. "Security will escort you from the building. Your resignation from the board will be effective immediately." "You can't." "I can, and I am. The evidence of your involvement in the arson is being turned over to the district attorney. Your stock options are being revoked under the moral turpitude clause of your contract. And if you come within 100 yards of any Laurent Technologies property or personnel, you'll be arrested for criminal trespass." As Marcus was led away by security, the remaining board members turned their attention to the future. The immediate crisis had passed, but the questions it raised about the company's direction remained. "Silvia," Eleanor said, "I want to be clear about something. This vote wasn't just about rejecting Marcus's motion. It was about endorsing your vision for what this company can become." "I understand." "Do you? Because what I saw today wasn't just effective crisis management. It was leadership that brings out the best in people. That young lady," she nodded towards Sophia, "spoke with more clarity and conviction than most executives I know. That's not an accident. That's the result of mentorship and inspiration." Sophia blushed, but didn't look away. "Miss Laurent taught me that science is about asking the right questions, not just knowing the right answers." "And what questions should we be asking now?" Eleanor prompted. "How do we turn this crisis into an opportunity?" Sophia replied immediately. "How do we use what we've learned to build something better than what existed before?" Mateo watched his daughter with pride and amazement. Somewhere in the past month, she'd grown from a bright child into a young woman with vision and purpose. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It was the result of having her potential recognized and nurtured by someone who understood what she could become. "I have a proposal," Silvia said, moving back to the presentation screen. "We've proven that our technology works best when it's developed in partnership with the communities it serves. What if we formalize that approach?" She pulled up a new slide that outlined a comprehensive community partnership program, complete with educational initiatives, local hiring priorities, and revenue-sharing agreements with fire-prone communities. "We already know that our detection systems are most effective when they're maintained by people who understand the local environment. What if we expand that model? Train local residents to become certified technicians, establish community advisory boards, create pathways for students like Sophia to participate in real research projects. That's a significant departure from traditional corporate structure," one board member observed. "Traditional corporate structure gave us Marcus Webb," Diego pointed out. "Maybe traditional isn't working so good." The adults in the room exchanged glances, recognizing the wisdom embedded in the child's observation. "There's something else," Mateo said, speaking for the first time since the vote. "Silvia's been talking about rebuilding my workshop, but I've been thinking about something bigger." He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the city where his family had struggled and nearly lost everything before finding sanctuary in an unlikely place. "What if instead of just rebuilding one workshop, we created a training center, a place where traditional craftsmanship meets modern technology, where kids from communities like mine can learn skills that can't be outsourced or automated?" "You're talking about workforce development," Eleanor said, her business mind immediately grasping the implications. "I'm talking about investment in human potential," Mateo corrected. "Silvia saved my family not because it made financial sense, but because it was the right thing to do. What if that became the company's operating principle? What if Laurent Technologies became known not just for innovative technology, but for innovative approaches to human development? The room was quiet as the board members absorbed the magnitude of what was being proposed. This wasn't just about surviving Marcus's coup attempt, it was about fundamentally reimagining what a successful technology company could look like. The shareholders, someone began, will benefit from having a company with a mission beyond quarterly profits. Silvia finished. Studies show that companies with strong social missions consistently outperform their peers over the long term. And more importantly, Sophia added with a grin, they get to be part of something that actually matters. As the meeting concluded and the board members filed out, Eleanor lingered behind with the Cruz family and Silvia. You know, she said, I've been in business for 30 years, and I've never seen anything quite like what happened here today. What do you mean? Silvia asked. I mean, a 12-year-old girl just helped save $1 billion company using a science fair project. If that's not worth celebrating, I don't know what is. 3 hours later, they found themselves back in the greenhouse where it had all begun, the late afternoon sun casting golden light through the clean glass panels that Mateo had installed with such care. The space had been transformed from abandoned relic to thriving workshop, but it was about to become something even more significant. The wooden rings sat on Mateo's workbench, simple bands carved from reclaimed oak that had once supported the roof of a century-old barn. He'd been working on them for weeks, using the quiet morning hours when the rest of the house slept to shape them with the kind of attention usually reserved for his finest commissioned pieces. They're beautiful, Silvia said, running her finger along the smooth curve of the larger ring. But are you sure? I mean, we've only known each other for a month. I've known you my whole life, Mateo replied, his voice soft with certainty. I just didn't meet you until the fire. Sophia looked up from her tablet, where she'd been documenting the day's events with the systematic approach she brought to all her projects. You know, in all my research about wildfire behavior, there's one thing that always comes up. What's that, mija? Mateo asked. Fire clears away what's dead and overgrown so new growth can take root. Sometimes destruction is just the first step toward creating something better. Diego nodded sagely. Like how our old apartment was too small, but we needed the fire to show us we could live somewhere better. And like how Miss Silvia needed us to show her that being alone isn't the same as being safe, Sophia added. Silvia laughed, though her eyes were bright with unshed tears. When did you two become so wise? When we got a new mum who teaches us science, Diego said matter-of-factly, as if the transformation of their family unit was the most natural thing in the world. The word mum hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and promise. Silvia had never thought of herself in maternal terms, had always assumed that her drive and ambition made her unsuitable for the patient nurturing that motherhood required. But watching Diego's face light up when he successfully programmed the greenhouse's irrigation system, or seeing Sophia's confidence bloom under careful encouragement, she'd discovered that nurturing could take many forms. Are you sure you want to take on all this chaos? She asked Mateo, gesturing at the organized disorder of their shared life science projects and carpentry tools, business documents and soccer equipment, the comfortable mess of a family that had grown together organically. I've been thinking about that, Mateo said, reaching for her hand. For 15 years, I've been building things for other people. Beautiful things, useful things, but always for someone else. This is the first time I've had the chance to build something for us. And what are we building? A foundation, he said simply, something strong enough to support whatever comes next. The proposal itself was simple, heartfelt, and conducted in front of the two people who mattered most to both of them. There were no grand gestures or elaborate speeches, just a man who had learned that love was about choosing each other every day, and a woman who had discovered that the greatest adventures came not from conquering new markets, but from opening her heart to possibility. Yes, Silvia said, slipping the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly. Yes, to all of it. As Mateo kissed her, Sophia and Diego cheered with the uninhibited joy of children who had watched two lonely people find their way to each other. The greenhouse around them seemed to pulse with life and potential, seeds planted and tended with care, finally ready to bloom. "So," Sophia said when the celebration had settled into comfortable happiness, "what happens now?" "Now we plan a wedding," Silvia said, "and we figure out how to merge a technology company with a carpentry workshop. And we help you get ready for high school even though you're only 12 because apparently you're smarter than most adults. And we teach Diego to drive the Tesla even though he's only 8 because apparently rules don't apply to this family," Mateo added with a grin. "I can't reach the pedals yet," Diego protested, "but maybe by the time I'm 10? "We'll see," Silvia said, already making mental notes about age, appropriate modifications to the vehicle's automation systems. As evening approached, they moved their celebration to the house proper, where Catherine had somehow materialized with champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for the children. The news of the day's events had spread through the Laurent Technologies office, and by sunset, a steady stream of employees had arrived to offer congratulations and witness this unprecedented merger of corporate and personal life. "I have to ask," Catherine said as she helped set up tables in the living room, "what's the plan for the actual ceremony?" "Small," Silvia said immediately. "Family only, probably here, in the greenhouse." "Define family," Catherine said with a knowing smile. Silvia looked around the room, taking in the faces of the people who had gathered to celebrate with them. Sophia's teacher, Mrs. Henderson, who had driven out after school to congratulate her star pupil. Several Laurent Technologies engineers who had been inspired by Sophia's presentation to think about their own community outreach possibilities. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had insisted on bringing enough food to feed everyone, despite having been invited only an hour earlier. "Anyone who cares enough to show up," Silvia said finally. "Anyone who understands that family isn't just about blood or law, it's about choosing to stick with each other through whatever comes." "Then you're going to need a bigger greenhouse," Catherine observed. As the impromptu celebration continued into the evening, Mateo found himself on the deck overlooking the ocean, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The events of the day felt surreal this morning. He'd been a displaced carpenter, trying to help the woman who'd saved his family. And now he was engaged to that same woman, while planning to revolutionize both their industries. "Papa?" Sophia joined him at the railing, her face serious with the weight of important thoughts. "Are you happy?" "Happier than I've been since your mother died," he said honestly, but also a little scared. "Why scared?" "Because this is all happening so fast. Because I want to make sure I'm making decisions for the right reasons. Because I love Silvia, but I also need to be sure that I'm not just grateful to her." Sophia was quiet for a moment, considering his words with the careful attention she brought to complex problems. "Remember when I wanted to quit the advanced math class because it was too hard?" she said finally. "You said you weren't smart enough for it. And you said that being smart enough wasn't the question. The question was whether I cared enough to do the work." Mateo smiled, recognizing his own words reflected back at him. And I think that's the same question now. Do you care enough about Miss Silvia to do the work of loving her every day, even when it's complicated?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Then it doesn't matter whether it started with gratitude or attraction or anything else. What matters is what you choose to build from here." When? 6 months later, the family portrait captured a moment of perfect contentment. Mateo stood behind Silvia in the restored greenhouse, his work-roughened hands resting gently on her shoulders. Sophia and Diego flanked them on either side, their faces bright with the confidence that comes from knowing you are loved unconditionally. Between them, the space bloomed with the evidence of their shared laboratomatos, heavy on the vine, herbs releasing their fragrance into the warm air, flowers that Diego had insisted on planting because gardens need pretty things too. But it was the details invisible to the camera that told the real story of their transformation. The custom-built workbenches where Sophia conducted increasingly sophisticated experiments under Silvia's mentorship, the traditional hand tools that hung beside state-of-the-art environmental monitoring equipment, the children's artwork taped to the glass panels next to technical drawings for the new community training center. Perfect, the photographer said, lowering her camera. That's exactly the shot the magazine was looking for. The interview had been Silvia's idea, though it had taken months of family discussion before they'd all agreed to it. Forbes wanted to do a feature story on the revolutionary partnership between high-tech innovation and traditional craftsmanship that had emerged from Laurent Technology's new community development program. What they'd found instead was something much more interesting, a love story that had redefined what business success could look like. Mrs. Laurent Cruz, the reporter said, consulting her notes, 6 months ago, your critics claimed that personal feelings were compromising your business judgment. Now Laurent Technologies is being hailed as a model for socially responsible corporate leadership. What changed? Silvia exchanged a glance with Mateo. Their communication, the kind of wordless understanding that develops between people who have learned to think as a team. Nothing changed, she said carefully. The same qualities that made me want to help a family in crisis, quick assessment of situations, willingness to take calculated risks, ability to see potential where others see problems. Those are exactly the qualities that make for good business leadership. But surely there's a difference between corporate decision-making and personal choices. Is there? Sophia interjected from her workbench, where she was calibrating sensors for her latest research project. When she saw our family needed help, she evaluated the situation, assessed her resources, calculated the risks and benefits, and made a strategic decision. That's exactly what she does when she's deciding whether to invest in new technology or enter new markets. The reporter looked startled by the interruption, but Silvia smiled. Sophia's confidence had grown exponentially over the past months, fueled by advanced coursework, real research opportunities, and the knowledge that her ideas were valued by adults who understood their potential. The difference, Mateo added, looking up from the custom furniture piece he was crafting for the training center, is that when your decision-making is guided by values beyond profit, you make choices that create long-term sustainability instead of short-term gains. Can you give me a specific example? The Community Partnership Program, Diego said, matter-of-factly, not looking up from the tablet where he was programming irrigation schedules with the focused intensity he brought to all technology-related tasks. Instead of just selling wildfire detection systems to governments and big companies, we train local people to install and maintain them. They get good jobs, we get better data, and communities get protection systems they actually understand. The reporter blinked, apparently unused to receiving strategic business analysis from an 8-year-old. Diego's right, Silvia said. The traditional model treats communities as markets to be served. Our model treats them as partners to be empowered. It's more complex operationally, but it's more effective in terms of actual wildfire prevention. And it's more profitable in the long run, Sophia added, because systems maintained by people who live with them last longer and work better than systems maintained by contractors who fly in from somewhere else. As the interview continued, moving from the greenhouse to Mateo's expanded workshop to the new training center that occupied what had once been an empty lot next to the mansion, the reporter began to understand what made this family and this business model so unusual. They had found a way to merge emotional intelligence with strategic thinking, traditional craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology, family values with corporate success. Mr. Cruz, the reporter said as they toured the training center, where a dozen students from various backgrounds were learning to combine woodworking skills with environmental monitoring technology. You gave up a successful independent business to join Laurent Technologies. Any regrets? Mateo paused beside a workstation where a young woman was assembling sensor housings with the same precision he might use for fine furniture. I didn't give up my business, he said. I expanded it. Before, I was building furniture for individual customers. Now I'm building foundations for entire communities. That's very poetic. But what about the practical aspects, the financial considerations? The practical aspect is that my children are getting the best education possible while learning that success isn't just about personal achievement, it's about contribution to something larger than yourself. Mateo's voice carried the quiet certainty that had attracted Silvia to him in the first place. The financial consideration is that we're all happier, more fulfilled and more secure than we've ever been. The interview concluded in the house's main living area, where the walls now displayed an eclectic mix of Sophia's science fair awards, Diego's art projects, Mateo's craftsmanship pieces, and photos documenting Silvia's various business achievements. It was a visual representation of lives that had been separate but were now thoroughly intertwined. "One final question," the reporter said. "What advice would you give to other business leaders who might be considering similar approaches to corporate social responsibility?" "Start with your values," Silvia said immediately. "Figure out what you actually care about beyond profit margins, and then find ways to align your business practices with those values. Don't be afraid to ask for help," Mateo added. "The best innovations come from collaboration between people with different skills and perspectives." "Remember that complicated doesn't mean impossible," Sophia contributed. "Some problems require complex solutions, but that's not a reason to avoid solving them. And sometimes the best answers come from kids," Diego concluded with a grin, "because we haven't learned yet that things are supposed to be impossible." After the reporter and photographer left, the family settled into their evening routine homework supervision that had evolved into collaborative research sessions, dinner preparation that involved everyone and usually resulted in experiments with new ingredients and the kind of casual conversation that happens when people genuinely enjoy each other's company. "Do you think the article will help other companies try similar programs?" Sophia asked, as they sat around the dinner table that Mateo had crafted from reclaimed wood, salvaged from the old workshop. "I hope so," Silvia said. "But more importantly, I hope it helps people understand that business success and social responsibility aren't opposites, they're partners." "Like you and Papa," Diego observed. "Exactly like that." As they cleaned up after dinner, a process that had become almost choreographed through months of practice, Silvia reflected on how completely her life had been transformed. 6 months ago, she had been successful but isolated, powerful but purposeless, wealthy but somehow impoverished in the ways that mattered most. Now she was part of something larger and more meaningful than any individual achievement. The company was thriving under the new partnership model, with communities across 3 states participating in the wildfire prevention program. Sophia had been accepted into a prestigious summer research program where she would work alongside graduate students on advanced environmental monitoring projects. Diego had started a club at school for kids interested in combining technology with environmental protection. And Mateo's training center was already producing its first graduates, young people equipped with both traditional skills and modern technological literacy. But perhaps most importantly, they had created a model that other families and businesses were beginning to emulate. The idea that success could be measured not just in financial terms, but in human development, community impact, and environmental protection was spreading beyond Laurent Technologies to influence other companies and organizations. "You know what I realized today?" Mateo said, as they stood together on the deck, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. "What's that?" "A year ago, I thought I was building furniture. Now I realize I was always building foundations for families, for communities, for futures I couldn't even imagine. And now I'm building the same things, just on a bigger scale, with better tools, with partners who share the vision." Silvia leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence and the quiet strength that had first attracted her to him in that smoke-filled building. "Think we'll be able to sustain it? This balance between family and business, between individual success and collective good. I think," Mateo said, pulling her closer, "that we've built something strong enough to last, something with deep roots and flexible branches, capable of weathering whatever storms might come." In the greenhouse visible through the living room windows, the automated systems they'd installed continued their quiet work, monitoring temperature and humidity, adjusting irrigation schedules, maintaining the optimal conditions for growth. But it was the human tending that made the real difference, the daily attention, the careful observation, the willingness to adapt and adjust based on what the plants actually needed rather than what the systems predicted they should need. It was, Silvia realized, a perfect metaphor for what they'd built together. Technology and automation could provide the framework, but love and attention and the willingness to put people before processes, that was what made the difference between mere survival and genuine flourishing. The family portrait they'd taken that morning would appear in Forbes magazine in 3 weeks, accompanied by an article that would inspire dozens of other companies to reconsider their approaches to corporate social responsibility. But the real picture, the one that captured what they'd actually accomplished, was this: 4 people who had found each other in crisis and chosen to build something beautiful together, day by day, decision by decision, with patience and hope and the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories do begin with the simplest acts of courage. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they end with the recognition that the best foundations are built not on certainty or control, but on the willingness to remain open to possibilities you never could have imagined.